Is it finally time to wildcard, or do we hold the nerve and take a -4 instead? We need to discuss all of that in today's Game Week 6 Transfer Plans video, as well as reflecting on a fantastic Game Week 5. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you do drop a like, and of course, smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, we need to review Game Week 5 and how the team actually got on, and thankfully, we ended up having a good game week. 75 points and a big green arrow from 1.7 million to around 951,000 in the world. You can see my exact overall rank here, and this game week was much needed. Off the back of a pretty bad game week in 4, you always want to bounce back pretty quickly, and thankfully this team has given me that. And of course, we do need to decide what the next steps are. So in order to do that, we need to reflect on the team and see what the current status is. So just a quick reminder, ended up doing Isak to Watkins in Game Week 5. Didn't really have an understanding whether Isak was going to start or not. And with those rumours, I didn't really have the luxury of a starting bench. So for that, I had to bring in Ollie Watkins for those guaranteed minutes. And as you can see, I put the captaincy on him. I didn't really think there were many other options in the team. I did have it on Trent at one point, who of course delivered an 11-pointer. But I felt like Ollie Watkins had the fixture, the form, and just generally felt more comfortable putting the captaincy on him. And end of the day, got a goal, no bonus points, but I'm happy with the decision on that transfer. So just running through the team very quickly. Henderson with the 9-pointer, a big surprise. Quite lucky, to be honest with you. Look at the highlights, but more than happy with that. Sometimes the ones that you don't expect the clean sheet in come in clutch. In terms of the defenders, Trent and Robertson, the double Liverpool defence, really nice differential this week. And again, we need to discuss whether I keep my Liverpool defence or move towards the Arsenal defenders in Game Week 6. I don't think it's as obvious as it first sounds. And we got Robinson with the 2-pointer. A little bit disappointing there, but I wasn't expecting a Fulham clean sheet against Newcastle with or without Alexander Isak. In terms of the midfield, Smith Rowe coming in clutch, but the big one, of course, is going to be Morgan Rogers. Now, I believe I put 9 points up in here, but he actually has had a 10-pointer. So I do apologise for that. I should really edit it, but I'm recording now. Saka with a 4-pointer and Eze with the 3-pointer. The big disappointment, of course, was Diogo Jota not getting a single minute in that Liverpool team. Meaning that Lewis Hall comes in as my auto sub. I do wish it was Muniz, but I had no idea whether he would actually come on the field or not. And finally, of course, as I mentioned, Watkins with the 12-pointer and Erling Haaland with that 9-pointer. The guy just cannot stop scoring. And if he's doing it against Arsenal, he can do it against any team, basically. So in terms of the team, really happy with Game Week 5. Of course, we're now going to take a look at Game Week 6 without any transfers to get an understanding whether this team does need a wildcard or not. Let me know in the comment section, how many points did you score in Game Week 5? So taking a look ahead of Game Week 6, and here is how my team is currently looking without any transfers made. And you can see at the bottom there, I have 0.4 million in the bank and 1 free transfer available. So the first thing we need to ask ourselves is, does this team need a wildcard? Because of course, Game Week 6 is a very popular time for a lot of managers activating their wildcards. So we firstly need to ask ourselves, why are managers wildcarding, and does my team need it in particular? So I'm going to put the fixtures up on the screen here right now for the next few game weeks to get an understanding of which teams are actually having a bit of a fixture swing and understand which of those teams I don't actually have in my own team. So firstly, of course, the one that we need to address is going to be Arsenal. Next 2 fixtures are fantastic up against the newly promoted sides, and it really does feel like you need at least a double up on that team. Now, my team currently has Bukayo Saka, so of course the priority will probably be bringing in another Arsenal player. So Arsenal assets based on these fixtures are clearly a team that we need to target. Another team that I want to address, of course, is going to be Brentford. Now, long-term, the fixtures are good, but it's the next 2 where I think a lot of managers are looking to bring in some of their assets. Bryan Mbeumo, of course, is the #1 pick. Delivered again in Game Week 5. Has had a great start to the season. And with these next 2 fixtures being at home, I really do think Brentford are a team that we want to target. I think firstly, Mbeumo is the #1 pick by clear. And then it's a case of if you want to add some other bits alongside him in the team. Another team like Bournemouth is a team that I think managers might struggle to go to if they are not wildcard. And of course, Semenyo's been ticking over really nicely. There are some other differentials out there like a Tavernier. So right now, I think Arsenal, Brentford and Bournemouth are teams that are absolutely ones to target in our transfer plans or in terms of the wildcard. Of course, a team like Everton, long-term have great fixtures, a Calvert-Lewin. We will discuss whether he is actually worth bringing in for a team like myself. And of course, on the other end of the spectrum, Liverpool being slightly lower down on the fixture ticket here, we can see Wolves, Palace, Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton. Not the easiest run of fixtures, and one would argue, is it time to move away from those Liverpool assets? But again, I need to come back to the case of sometimes investing in the best teams is the way to play. And I think Man City, Arsenal and Liverpool will just always be great teams to invest in, because even though the fixtures are difficult on paper, I don't really think they are the teams that we want to be just looking away from right now. We've seen that historically. The big teams continue to be consistent in their returns, and I just don't feel that comfortable completely moving away from those assets to bring in teams who are from, let's be real, bottom half teams. So those are the coverage of the fixtures. Basically, in conclusion, I need probably another Arsenal player. I need Bryan Mbeumo in this team ideally. Maybe some Bournemouth coverage if I really want to go there, but it doesn't feel absolutely essential. And of course, then I need to assess whether the players that I currently have in my team can actually compete with those that are coming into other people's wildcards. So looking at the team right now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't actually think this team needs a wildcard. I know that I don't have a second or third Arsenal player, but of course I can take a -4 to bring in somebody like that. And in terms of the attackers, we've spoken about how Calvert-Lewin and someone like a Chris Wood are absolutely going to be great picks. But is Ollie Watkins away against Ipswich a bad fixture? Absolutely not. And I do think for those managers that are wildcarding probably can't squeeze in somebody like an Ollie Watkins. So all of a sudden, he becomes an incredible differential for game week 6. And I don't even have to do anything with him in my team. So right now, I am planning on actually not using my wildcard. We're going to come into some of the best Diogo Jota replacements now in terms of underlying numbers just to get a bit of an understanding. But based on this team, yes, I need a bit more Arsenal. Yes, there are a couple of players that I'm missing, but I don't think it is justified to use a wildcard based on these players that I do have right now. Rodgers is in great form. He's been good all season. Smith Rowe is ticking over nicely in a Fulham team that are impressive. And we got the talisman and Eze, who on another day easily could have returned in game week 5. So right now, the plan is not to wildcard. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's take a look at the best Jota replacements, because really, he is such a minutes risk right now. He is the one that needs to come out of this team. So with the plan to keep my wildcard in my back pocket with one free transfer and the rotation risk of Diogo Jota, that is the obvious move for my team right now. So the 3 players that I think are just the obvious replacements for them are going to be Bryan Mbeumo at 7.2 million, Diaz, another Liverpool player, at 7.9 million, and then the premium of Cole Palmer at 10.6. So before we come into the underlying numbers, I will just put up the fixtures once again, just as a bit of a recap on them long term. But I do need to note, in terms of Cole Palmer, I cannot get to him as part of a free transfer. So we need to conclude whether taking a -4 to bring in Cole Palmer is actually justifiable for the team, because of course that is a big jump in terms of that of Diaz and Bryan Mbeumo. So look at the fixtures right now. Obviously Brentford for the next 2 are fantastic at home against West Ham, who are really struggling right now, and Wolves. Yes, game week 8 is away against Man United, but again, we've seen them score against Man City, for example. I don't think it's a terrible game. Then Ipswich, Fulham and Bournemouth. This is a player that you would bring in and just keep in for the long term, regardless of your wildcard plans. In terms of Luis Diaz, again, we mentioned about how the fixtures take a slight turn. Obviously, they've got Chelsea and Arsenal in game weeks 8 and 9. But again, the fixtures either side of that, and the way that Diaz and Liverpool are attacking, I don't think it's a bad investment at all to keep those Liverpool assets in the team. It may even prove to be a bit of a differential if managers look to move away from Liverpool assets. And finally, of course, with Chelsea's Cole Palmer, we're a little bit indifferent about Chelsea in general because the minutes, even that of Cole Palmer, are being rotated. We saw that again in game week 5, but I still think the fixtures short term are great. Brighton followed by Nottingham Forest, but again, we need to remember Forest have been a tough cookie this season. Then, of course, Liverpool away, Newcastle, who have been awful this season, Man United, Arsenal. So I would say that the fixtures long-term are probably the worst for Chelsea. But the next two, I do feel like the way Chelsea are playing right now, Cole Palmer does have some big returns in him. So at 10.6 million, even though Cole Palmer is obviously a brilliant asset, and looking at the underlying numbers, the thing about it is his underlying numbers have actually been some of the worst of the three that we're looking at right now. XG at 0.96 is the worst of the three by far, but of course he is such a creative monster in that Chelsea team. 2.4 expected assists. Based on the fixtures, based on my situation with the team, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to take a -4 to bring in Cole Palmer into this team. So it's all about Mbeumo versus Luis Diaz. Now, again, I think the fixtures are pretty mixed, but I do think long-term Mbeumo's are probably a little bit better. Look at the numbers for Luis Diaz right now. He's in unbelievable form. He's had 13 shots and 11 of those have been in the box. So this isn't a player that has got 13 shots but is taking his shots from anywhere on the pitch. 11 of those in the box, and that is highlighted by his ridiculous XG of 3.75. And obviously has scored 5 goals. So even though he is overperforming, he's still putting up unbelievable underlying numbers. And he's also had 7 big chances in that Liverpool team. So he is really the one that we should have gone for in pre-season, and he continues to be the one to invest in. I know Mo Salah is the premium, but with the numbers that Diaz is putting up, take away the penalties, he is probably the best value midfielder in the game right now. And of course, 43 expected FPL points. He's delivered 51. He is just playing incredible right now. Now, of course, with Bryan Mbeumo, I think the fixtures are slightly better, as I've mentioned. 10 shots, really good. And of course, 8 of those being in the box. So decent underlying numbers once again. And with Bryan Mbeumo coming into this team with the absence of Wissa and of course no Ivan Toney, he really is having to step up as one of the main attackers in that Brentford team. And an XG of 1.49 and an expected assist of 1.59. Not the same level as that of Luis Diaz, but still really good underlying numbers. So based on this right now, in terms of the fixtures, I think Luis Diaz does make a lot of sense right now, and I don't think the fixtures are terrible. But when we take into account, of course, Champions League football, that is something that we do need to remember. And with players like Gakpo and Darwin Núñez waiting in the wings, even though Diaz is in the form of his life right now, and I do expect him to start more games than not, I think the fact that Brentford have no cup commitments and Mbeumo is absolutely the talisman in this team, I think it just makes complete sense to make my priority transfer being Jota to Mbeumo for the next few fixtures, knowing that a lot of people on WILDCARD are bringing him in. It covers me off nicely, and I think rightly so, he probably is the priority move for my team. So Jota to Mbeumo is the move that I'm looking to make, but I do think Diaz is a phenomenal move for a lot of managers. So here is my Game Week 6 team with the planned transfer of doing Jota to Mbeumo, because based on what I've looked at, I really do think that is the ideal move for my team. I haven't made it yet because I missed the Bryan Mbeumo price rise on Saturday night. Unfortunately, I was out, so I missed that price rise. And of course, Jota fell last night, but that didn't make any difference on the sell-on price for him in my team. So now we're looking at this team, nothing in the bank, 0.7 million. And again, does this team need a wildcard? Well, if we look at it, Trent is in a lot of wildcard teams right now. Saka, of course, is an essential. Mbeumo, Rodgers is featuring a lot of teams. I think Eze is in a lot of teams. I think people are going for Semenyo over Smith Rowe, but are we that fussed about keeping Smith Rowe? I don't think so. I think he's ticking over really nicely. Haaland's going to be in all the wildcard teams. I don't think Watkins is going to be, but I also don't think that's a terrible thing to have Watkins in the team, as I've mentioned. A lot of people would have Calvert-Lewin this week, but would I rather have Calvert-Lewin or Watkins? I think the answer is going to be Watkins. I think the big thing about this team is I've got a lot of the key players in the team, but it's the sprinklings around the edges. People probably don't have Robinson. They've probably got a lot better 4.5 million defender, maybe someone like an Aina at Nottingham Forest or a Mikalenko at Everton. But again, does that require me taking a wildcard? And I think the answer is going to remain no. The big question left with this team is, do I take a -4 and get rid of someone like Robertson to bring in Gabriel for his home fixture against Leicester? Or do I maybe look to do a Muniz to a Calvert-Lewin and maybe bring him into the team and bench someone like a Smith Rowe? But based on this right now, I don't think the team requires a wildcard unless an injury happens midweek to one of those teams featuring in the Europa League. So I'm happy to stick with this team. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's take a look at my team over the next few weeks to get an understanding of if it can remain strong in future game weeks. So finally, we need to take a look at how my team not only looks in game week 6, but in future game weeks. And honestly, I would say this is the biggest top tip for those FPL managers out there. You're going to see right now that, of course, I've come to the conclusion that I don't think it is desperate for me to use my wildcard because game week 6 in isolation looks great. But we need to remember FPL is played over multiple game weeks. And you're going to see in game week 7 that this team really gets stretched. And then we need to ask ourselves, is the wildcard in game week 6 actually going to be needed just because of what this team will look like in future game weeks? So if we come to the conclusion right now in game week 6 that taking a -4 to sell someone like Robertson, who could easily clean sheet against Wolves, for someone like a Gabriel isn't worth it. And I think based on that, I think Leicester at home is going to be goals for Arsenal, which naturally will mean the bonus points will be attracted to the attackers. If we come to some sort of conclusion that Gabriel can't score in every game, and maybe he will, but if Gabriel doesn't score and he comes up with a 6-pointer, Robertson, I could easily see get a clean sheet, then it doesn't really make a lot of sense taking the -4. So if we come to that conclusion, coming into game week 7, this is where the real first problems lie, because my bench, as we know, is in tatters. We've got Henderson at home against Liverpool. I mean, he could keep a clean sheet, but then we got double Liverpool away against Palace, who I do think have the firepower to hurt Liverpool. We got Robinson away against City, which is terrible. Smith Rowe away against City. Eze at home against Liverpool, not the worst, but he's playing up against my double defence. Rodgers at home against Man United, I don't think is bad. And then, of course, we've got Watkins at home against Man United, which, once again, I do not think is a bad fixture. So we have probably got 3 or 4 players here who really do have torrid fixtures. And when we come down to the fixtures in game week 7 in isolation, you can see here, we've only got 1 Arsenal asset for that home game against Southampton. So it does beg the question, should I force an Arsenal player in earlier on? Bournemouth, of course, away against Leicester, so there'll be a lot of managers out there with Bournemouth players. I don't have any coverage in that area. I've got the best Brentford player, so I'm not really too fussed about that. Chelsea at home against Forest. I think obviously that is a okay fixture, but Forest have proved themselves in the opening few weeks. Of course, outside of that, only 1 Man City player. Spurs away against Brighton, not really a fixture that is easy to predict. West Ham at home against Ipswich, and then Wolves away against Brentford. So, of course, based on the fixture difficulty there, obviously if we are to tailor it, Man United away against Villa, I don't feel like I need any of those assets. Newcastle away against Everton, don't really need a piece of that. The fixtures aren't great, but I also don't think there are loads that I need to have coverage in, apart from maybe Bournemouth away against Leicester. But then all of a sudden, the fixtures are terrible for Bournemouth, as we can see at the bottom here. So with my 1 free transfer in game week 7, obviously the priority is going to be, can I get a piece of Arsenal? But then it begs the question, should maybe I have done that in game week 6 and thought about it as a 2 game week punt? So if we come back to game week 6, maybe taking the move of doing Robertson to Gabriel will just make my team look a little bit better, even though it's taking a -4 in this week in isolation, understanding that probably it does pay off in the next 2 game weeks with an away game against Palace for Liverpool. And all of a sudden the team looks a little bit better, but we still have those problem players in the team with Robinson away against Man City and Smith Rowe away against Man City as well. So we could make a sideways move if we wanted to for this team and try to bring in a player of a bit of a better caliber. When we look at the longer term fixtures, maybe we could squeeze in somebody from a Nottingham Forest potentially who could come in, but again, away against Chelsea is not ideal. So what I'm trying to say is this: I still don't think the team needs a wild card, but we need to remember that in future game weeks, these are the weeks that we need to look at. And coming into game week 8, once again, we have a fixture swing where the players have good fixtures, but my bench remains the same, where they can't really contribute to the team because they have no guaranteed minutes. So the team feels like each and every week it is relying on having no fresh injuries in the team. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. It's always really ideal to take a look at the game weeks coming up to see how your team reacts in each week. I still don't think it needs a wild card, but I do think a -4 might be required. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 6 Transfer Plans video. I really hope it's provided some value. And again, let me know your current transfers in the comment section. I'll always be interested to know. And if you have any questions, please do let me know. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to drop a like. And of course, smash the subscribe button for daily fantasy content. And I'll see you in tomorrow's video where we'll be previewing a wildcard team for Game Week 6. Both the template and a bit of a differential team. Take care. Have an amazing day. Cheers.